Well, good morning, everyone. Really lovely to join you. As I say, I'm going to stay seated for this presentation, and just because it enables me to stay mic'd up. But because we're in such a resplendent council chamber, I'll rely on you to give me a wave if you can't hear me. So you've already heard, we're here at the culmination of our first, hopefully annual Talk Money Week, which is all about encouraging organisations and service users and customers all across the UK to start conversations about money, and also showcasing services and as organisations leading the charge to make our work more effective and turn evidence into action. And it's on that point about evidence into action that I'm going to speak to today. As a very kind introduction mentioned, I've been with the Money Advice Services journey on our What Works Fund from its inception. So what I'd like to do today is just give you a really, quick, but also kind of high-level overview of some of the themes and learning that's been emerging from that fund. I'm going to just take a few minutes this morning just to give you an overview of the shape of the fund, highlight a couple of the things we've learned, and I really stress it's going to be kind of one or two high-level things, some of which may seem very intuitive to you, hopefully some will be new too, and then share with you kind of where we're going next. So firstly, and I'm very aware this is not the most legible slide for those at the back, I wanted to just give you a sense of the shape of the fund. Now, I know putting up a slide like this, which is very helpful for a policy and research person like me, it's very helpful for talking to government and giving an account of what we do and what we've done. What it is a bird's eye view of some numbers and figures, and what's really missing from this is, of course, the kind of detailed stories about clients and about families and about impacts of the projects we funded. I'm really pleased to say in breakout sessions today we can hear from one of those stories, Money Matters, which I'm sure you'll learn a lot from if you're going to that session. So I know people in the room will be hopefully broadly familiar with our What Works Fund, but just a reminder for those that are, or a refresher for those that are less so, and the overall shape of it. So it was a significant investment in both the quality and quantity of evidence about impact of money guidance interventions, support with financial capability. It was a significant investment from the Money Advice Service in a total of 64 projects. 8 of those had beneficiaries that included people in Scotland, and 6 of those projects were focused specifically within Scotland. It's not, though we funded partly service delivery, it's not a service delivery or ongoing fund, it's specifically, from the title, What Works, it's specifically about increasing the quality and quantity of evidence about impact and approaches that work, and finding out what's effective to improve financial capability at different life stages, from children and young people to older people in retirement. I'm a policy and research person, I love evidence, I love data, but we're not an educational body, we're not an academic body, we're not gathering evidence for its own sake. We're generating that because we want to influence practice, both directly from sharing that learning with practitioners and organisations, but also critically for us in trying to coordinate and influence the wider system, from financial services through government at different levels and different places through to the third sector, to try and use that to shape and drive funding priorities and commissioning over time. So if you've got very good eyesight, you'll see types of organisations. So principally it was a grant fund. It was focused on learning evaluation. So principal beneficiaries were unsurprisingly voluntary community sector, third sector organisations, but we also saw involvement of universities, of education institutions, of credit unions too. Moving over to the far right-hand side of the slide, looking at kind of anticipated outcomes, or the kind of outcomes we were measuring. So we were encouraging all the providers of the fund to engage with and use our financial capability outcomes framework, partly because it's a well-tested, well-verified set of meaningful outcomes for individuals' financial capability, but also because there's value about building an evidence base over time, that the more we have similar comparable outcomes assessed as part of interventions, the more we can build that case to funders, to commissioners and to other practitioners as well. And really positive for me in all of this is that Unsurprisingly, nearly all of the grant funds were assessing improved skills and knowledge around money management. Of course, you'd expect that kind of very kind of classic set of outcomes to measure financial capability, but really valuable given our financial capability framework and our approach on capability. Around 3/4 were looking at attitudes and mindsets around money as well, which is really valuable. We offered organisations funding for essentially kind of 3 different types of projects. Either a kind of pure evaluation of a service that was already live and running, a pilot of a totally new service, or a small amount of delivery funding to increase the scale of an existing project or kind of nascent idea that was sort of in delivery but not fully yet, to the level at which it could be properly evaluated. And you'll see that what we weren't able to do at this stage, I think, kind of reflects the maturity and then the level of previous investment, financial capability, and how that money's come into the sector. What we were open to but got fewer applications for, we're looking to test interventions at a much bigger scale, other than digital interventions. Not get onto that for a second. So what I'm going to do in the next bit of the presentation is just walk you through, very briefly, kind of by life stage, a couple of key learning points, putting out a couple of examples that have stuck with me from the findings we're getting out of the evaluations. I'll touch on this at the end as well, but on our online evidence hub, you will be able to access the full detailed evaluations, independent evaluations of all of our projects that were reported so far. That's a huge amount of learning. This is a high-level summary of that. So what I wanted to do at this point was, in case you're looking to zone out for the rest of my presentation and retune again for the next speaker, I wanted to give you 8 key learning points from me, which look across the life course, things I think we can distill, and things we're taking forward from it. So if you're planning to zone out, stay on Twitter and tune in to the next presentation. This is the slide to take in. So firstly, I think really important to say, projects did show evidence of impact, and critically, I think from my perspective, financial capability policy person, they showed multiple outcomes as well. Now, of course, you'd hope that. We invested a significant amount of funding in this programme of grants, but I think, as I say, I've been on the full journey with the Money Advice Service from the inception of this fund through to delivery, and we and others had questions at the start about, well, actually, in the timescales we've got, we're trying to assess capability. We know better than most that capability is a lifelong journey, changes over time. Will we be able to show signs of impact that are meaningful and relevant to the kind of attitude and mindset outcomes we're interested in skills and knowledge, and embed that in young people and older people? So I think it's really promising. It's a high-level finding, but we shouldn't shrink away from it. That we have a large number of evaluations now that show clear and persuasive impact, and impact across multiple outcomes areas as well. Secondly, I think one of the key learning points from across the age ranges is the value in train-the-trainer programs. And I think in children and young people in financial education in schools, people might be very familiar with that model, but I think we're increasingly seeing the value and the impact of that kind of working elsewhere too. Group sessions, workshop sessions are of course an incredibly popular delivery channel for meeting the needs of young adults and working age adults. There is evidence that those produce strong skills and knowledge foundations that can be built on over time. Peers can be incredibly important and effective in influencing outcomes and shaping financial capability. And of course, the parents are absolutely key to improving children's financial capability too. And I think we're increasingly seeing the importance of that role, that parental role, cutting both ways, in that we've, I think, have long known that a useful way to engage parents in improving their own financial capability is to encourage them to think about their role as a parent and responsibilities and use that connection. And increasingly, actually, we're seeing that the other way too, that engaging children and young people in financial education can have a positive impact on their parents too. And, rather than a but, some really interesting barriers and challenges we came across. Firstly, and I think this is again key learning from right across the fund, engagement is really, really difficult. And I know that won't be news to people in the room. It wasn't a surprise to us. I think what was really interesting is that given we built our funding priorities and our kind of grant development stage around working with our grantees to really try and pinpoint how we could engage clients, how we could mitigate against drop-off during the intervention, how we could design and build an intervention and evaluate it that would really get people through the doors. It's a real startling and important piece of learning that even in that context, engagement is still absolutely an absolutely critical challenge, even when we're already focusing on sort of teachable moments, points of access. Confidence as well, the more research we do, the more evaluation we do on financial capability, the importance of financial confidence, it gets more and more significant as a barrier to engaging, but also adopting new attitudes, new ways of working, but also tools as well. And that confidence cuts both ways. It's of course a problem with underconfidence, and that people struggle to have the financial confidence to take control of their money and believe and engage with services that will help them manage it more effectively, but also overconfidence too is a barrier to engagement. People just assuming it's not something they need help with. And finally, and it's very helpful that the Honour Chair touched on this as well, around kind of digital interventions. And I think an important reminder from the projects that had digital components or were digitally led from the What Works Fund is that it's not a simple or easy answer to the problem of how you scale solutions. You don't just kind of cut through that engagement challenge by putting stuff online or through digital means. So, just to walk through now in the rest of the time I have, some high-level findings kind of by stages of the life course: children, young people, young adults, working age adults, and older people in retirement. So, firstly, for children and young people, trainer-led sessions in mainstream schools, we've now got evidence that they lay critical building blocks for financial capability, and we know from other research what some of those critical building blocks are that will not only improve older children's financial capability and improve financial education outcomes, but will have a good chance of influencing financial capability in adulthood too. But, and this is an important corollary, to improve financial behaviours rather than behaviour in the classroom, what we need to do is to build in some experiential learning. So it's the kind of use it or lose it. It's great to have classroom sessions. It can lay building blocks, but in order to leverage that and for it to make an impact, we need to make sure there's experiential learning going on with it. And from one particularly big randomised control trial, we found out that teaching teachers to deliver financial education has positive effects for the teachers themselves as well as the students. So from one randomised control trial looking at financial education to older children, so 16 plus children in schools and colleges in England, they found that teachers were more confident in delivering financial educations and evaluating the effectiveness of them compared to teachers that had not had that training. Interestingly as well, from the teacher's point of view, that had a positive impact on their classroom practice as well. They were tailoring financial education a lot more to different classes' needs and the needs of different students, and using a greater variety of methods of teaching finance topics in those classes. Interestingly, I can make no grand claims from this, but to report the finding, on those teacher training projects, they found that the training had the greatest impact on teachers who had 10 years or less in classroom, which for us, not to extrapolate the world from one finding, but it does help underline and raise the questions about the value of getting financial education as part of more formal teacher training for people starting on the teaching career. So that's some impacts on teachers, and that randomised control trial also found that the students who experienced those classroom lessons were much more confident managing money. And interestingly about that study, particularly around themes like seeking financial help, approaching issues like fraud and identity theft and those kind of risks, which were, I I think, which are less typically taught in the classroom. One of the interesting things about that project, that was, because it was going to children and younger people aged 16 plus, a slightly older age cohort than we often traditionally think of by default as financial education, it was able to engage with some of those, I think, kind of less traditional capability topics. Just looked at my watch and realised I need to speed up, so now I'm trying to resist the urge just to get through all the same information but talk a lot quicker. So I'll try and be a bit more selective. So additionally on children and young people, of course teachers aren't the only key messengers. Parents are absolutely critical, and therefore support for parents to boost their confidence is an effective part of thinking about their relationship and their role in financial education for their children. And that quote there from the Family Fortunes programs I think is really, really useful in thinking about what that significance of financial confidence means in practice, in grounding and including money in day-to-day, weeks-to-weeks tasks and activities between children and their parents to improve financial capability. So moving on to young adults. So 4 things I think it's worth stressing in terms of findings from our What Works Fund. Firstly, and this will obviously be absolutely stating the blindingly obvious to practitioners who work with young adults in the room, but I think it's an important learning point from our fund. Young adults are of course not a homogenous group, and we need to think about interventions geared to and focused on specific circumstances that we're trying to address. And yes, I appreciate that's a very obvious thing to say. I think it's important because from a financial capability point of view, when we're talking about service design or trying to influence commissioners, that the thing I take from this is that therefore it's not as simple as just offering a bolt-on financial capability offer for a young people's project. We really have to think as part of service design about what the needs are of that group. Secondly, specialist training for youth practitioners can make them more effective in supporting the young adults they work with money topics. And interestingly, really strong science from across a number of projects of our fund about the effectiveness of peer-led sessions in building engagement, with the important corollary, I think, that when we're talking about young adults, particularly in more vulnerable circumstances, and we're talking about the value and impact that peer support can have, the recognition that those peers need support too. Yes, of course, with money management issues, but also kind of pastoral support as well, particularly to work and be effective in supporting people in vulnerable circumstances. Moving on to working age life, hugely broad and diverse and a long part of the life course to cover. The evidence from the What Works Fund evaluations really drive home the value of focusing on teachable moments. As I mentioned, we've spent a lot of time with the grantees we worked with, and indeed in our original targeting of the fund, to try and examine where could we identify either teachable moments, opportunity to influence and engage people that had been shown to be effective in the past or shown to be effective in other service areas that could be leveraged for this. And I think one of the things we should feel more confident about as a financial capability community as a result of the learning from this fund is that actually some of those life events, and not just the classic ones that we at the Money Advice Service build money guidance around, positive life events, buying a home, starting a family, getting married, but they can be moments of immediate need as well. And certainly kind of in the early stage of the fund, when I was working with some of the grantees on the evaluation plans on the service design, a part of me was a little bit worried that actually we're trying to ask people who are entering a crisis point, who need to deal with lots of things, is it just going to be too much to ask them to engage with money management as well? And the honest answer to that in some cases, yes, that's true, but actually I think looking across the fund, there are some really interesting examples of people in quite difficult circumstances of immediate need engaging with money for the first time. The value of that being that frontline workers who we know are stretched in a whole variety of service areas can still be vital and effective points of engagement and ways to influence financial capability. But what we need, therefore, is really not only good training and support for them, but really good referral pathways too. And what was really helpful for me, again, thinking about the different kinds of outcomes that are really important to financial capability, is the importance of, and the value and the evidence we've got from the fund, that we can show and demonstrate evidence of changes to mindset and attitude along with skills and knowledge, and that is coming through in the fund, which is really valuable. And once you get into the minutiae, and hopefully we'll read some of those detailed evaluation reports, you can pick up a really interesting and complex picture emerging as a result of some interventions where you do get something more mixed. So, for instance, in an online, numeracy-led intervention, one of the elements of which was a kind of online delivery of that numeracy support. There were positive changes in mindset and positive changes in skills and knowledge around numeracy, but in particular groups, drops in confidence. So really interesting, there was an online numeracy assessment. One of the things you had to do was fill out a numeracy quiz, and one of the challenges in that is that for people who were out of work and seeking jobs who went through that intervention, there was some evidence that they dropped their confidence as a result of having to do that quiz, which again, if you push to do a quiz online, you can see why that might happen. But again, it kind of picks up that more complex, nuanced picture about trying to influence skills and mindset. As I mentioned in the kind of headline slide, technology isn't a simple solution to scale because it brings with it its own challenges of low engagement. One of the grants that was less successful that we ended early was a purely digital intervention, and the primary reason we did was not because of the grantee, was just purely because the intervention they designed was a new app with a couple of referral points, and just clients weren't coming through. It was a whole new app, people weren't used to it, and they just couldn't get people engaged. However, personalised one-to-one support wrapped around a digital solution can break down some of those barriers, just as using peer support around other interventions, around group sessions, can increase their effectiveness. So pointing out one of those examples, which was again a full kind of randomised control trial led by the Good Things Foundation, which looks at combining digital and financial literacy with a really practical focus on helping people engage with online transactions, and that showed both increasing skills and increasing confidence as well. People were 6.5 times more likely to transact again online as a result of that training. So digital can work, it can be a really important part of the mix, but it's not simply a neat solution to scale. Really interesting pilot looking at financial resilience from the working age section of the grant fund, which was entitled Supported Rentflex, which was a small trial in a southeast England-based housing association working with a couple of charities, so focused specifically on social housing tenants, providing them with budgeting support and guidance alongside a personalised rent schedule if they went along with that training to help them kind of defray that kind of rental burden over the course of the year to meet some of the challenges of fluctuating income. I won't go into the detail. The full case study and evaluation is online, but you'll see from the slide there a small trial, but a really interesting one that offer a very practical assistance with fluctuating incomes combined with the financial capability offer. Saw not only increased take-up of other support available from that housing association, but reduction in credit use, increase in well-being, and of the small number of tenants who've been through the full 12 months of that intervention, over 70% have reduced their historical arrears, and that was an intervention targeted at people with previous arrears. Final couple of slides from me focusing on older people in retirement. What we're seeing for older people is in many areas quite similar to that of working age life, in that trainer-led group sessions can have a really positive impact on financial capability. What we're pointing out to that though is that there are some topics and areas which are easy to engage older people with than others. So income maximisation, which I know is a widely delivered and available topic of support, remains popular, very practical, focused on benefits, utility switching, and so forth. It's been much more difficult to create interventions and models that will really help people already in retirement to engage with topics and questions that we in Money Advice Services group under the kind of heading of planning ahead, which could cover a whole raft of things, but I think particularly challenging now as retirement is no longer, or less likely to be a single event. Retirements are getting longer, and I think a big challenge about how we engage, how we can find ways of engaging people already in retirement in planning ahead for what would hopefully be a long retirement. And also another challenge to engagement for older people is that as an age cohort, older people tend to report already kind of higher levels of skills and knowledge, and therefore are less likely to self-identify as in need or as in need of help. But what was really interesting is that for some of those effective group sessions, we were seeing signs that outcomes around money management could be not only sustained 3 months after an intervention, but actually could increase after the intervention too. So it is relevant and meaningful to talk about improved skills and attitudes around money for intervening for older people in retirement. Finally, from me on older people, digital skills can be a useful hook for engagement as a way of identifying a skill area that is meaningful and it's something that older people would like to engage in. The challenge is then to make sure we're finding ways of including and addressing money management as part of that. And I think a gap we'd acknowledge, not from what our grantees are being asked to do, but from the initial kind of application we got for the fund. We went out to the sector across the UK. What we got through fewer bids and plans to do is to focus specifically around the challenge of helping older people guard against scams and fraud, which is obviously an area of increasing demand and need. So I think an open question for us going forward there. So that's it from me. Just to say, this is obviously a very high-level overview, picking out a couple of themes across over 60 diverse, interesting, complicated projects. We now have more large-scale quality interventions tested against comparable outcomes. We have further work coming out, thematic summaries, looking at channels, looking at messengers, and a full programme review that we're hoping to publish before Christmas. Everything we've got so far, both some of this age-related kind of summaries of the evaluation learning, but particularly the individual evaluation reports that go into a lot more detail about each programme we reported, are all freely available on the Financial Capability Evidence Hub to use, and that is really helping us distill and clarify ideas about what does work at each life stage to improve financial capability. And that's something as Money Advice Service reaches the end of its life and looking forward to a single financial guidance body, we are distilling and we're putting in front of a single financial guidance body and other audiences to funders and commissioners to hopefully take forward in the future. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much.